Interest in AI has been skyrocketing the last 12 months, and many think that generative AI and machine learning could fundamentally change the digital landscape. And here at Money 2020, the financial industry has certainly taken note. My name is Mike Baxter. I lead the product development efforts at Entrust, and I'm here with Pete Kaulbach from MasterCard, and we're going to talk about AI and what it could mean to the financial industry. Pete, thanks a lot for joining us here.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we start, could you give us a little description about what your responsibilities are and your roles are at MasterCard?
Yeah, absolutely. So at MasterCard, I work on digital first. So digital first commercialization. And for us, digital first is how we empower our financial institutions to have a better consumer experience. And it's really the consumer experience we focus on is the kind of the end-to-end payments consumer experience. And what that means for us is we start at acquisition, which is customer onboarding. And then we move to usage, which is tokenization, management, transaction management, and then continuing to engage the consumer through loyalty and benefits and things like that.
Fantastic. So digital experience, certainly that's part of the digital landscape that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So if we talk about the potential side, what's exciting bankers and customers about the potential of the AI technology?
Well, you know what? It's funny because they are really excited about it, but because of where I work, I get a lot more questions about what the heck is this stuff, right? And how can it help me with my consumer experience? Can I improve my consumer experience with AI? And especially, can I reduce risk using AI? And so when we think about consumer experience, it's interesting because those two things, the risk and consumer experience, are kind of at opposite ends, right? They don't, if you want to have a great consumer experience, it usually means you got to go fast. But if you want to do a lot of risk assessment, it means you got to go slow. But luckily, AI, because of its unique properties, can actually improve customer experience and also improve risk. So let me give you kind of an example of that. So we've got a product called NewDetect. And NewDetect really focuses on consumer behavior versus the device itself. And so it's looking at consumer behavior on a one-to-one basis or a one-to-many basis. Mm-hmm. So it's saying, hey, Pete, what you're doing when you're applying for a card or an account, is that normal behavior for Pete, right? So that's kind of the one-on-one. And then it's also saying, hey, Pete, what you're doing, is that normal compared to the general public out there? So we've seen a lot of people apply for cards, and how they apply for cards is what you're doing similar to that, or is it way off? And from there, we can kind of assess the risk.
So what you're saying, I mean, it's a bit of a balancing act, right? So with any new technology, we were talking about product development before we first came on, right? The bigger the technical innovation, sometimes the bigger the challenges that you might have to overcome that come hand in hand.
Absolutely.
So when bankers are looking at AI, could you comment a little bit more about what some of those challenges or even threats could be the financial industry?
Absolutely. So that's the biggest thing. So there's a lot of bad actors out there, and we know that they get used to the same technology as we do, right? So they use AI, and they're using it in really unique and innovative ways. So things like deep fakes, synthesized identities, voice cloning. So some really interesting stuff. So a deep fake is when they're taking, they're creating something like a media of some sort, whether that's a picture or a video, is completely fabricated, but using AI. So they can use that picture on identification, for example, or they can use the video in like a video selfie. So they have the tools to be able to create these things. And then a synthetic identity, well, that's something where they're taking one piece of identity that they already know. So an identity element like a social security number. Yeah. And so they've got that they've probably stolen from somewhere, but then they're building out a profile all around that and building out additional identity elements around it to create this complete profile. And then something like voice cloning, you may be asked to do a voice print when you're onboarding, and you can listen to videos or whatever on the internet and get voice prints and then create voice clone from those, so you're able to actually use it to their advantage to sound like they are somebody who they're not.
So it sounds like what you're saying with your digital first going forward, there's lots of opportunity for user experience, but the difficulty is like the AI is providing more sophisticated fraud vectors in a sense, right? It's more difficult, and that's what we talked about. Fraud flowing to the new technology. So these kind of the deep fakes, the synthetic identity, what can financial or the payments industry, what can we do to combat those? Is it an arms race, or what can we do?
Well, in many cases it is, right? But AI is transforming the customer identification process, like know your customer, by using behavioral biometrics, which help us assess, patterns and anomalies and risks. And then it uses machine learning and the ability to synthesize a tremendous amount of data to create a consumer profile that ultimately will help our financial institutions understand the authenticity or really understand whether a ID is fake or not, or whether somebody is actually trying to impose themselves to somebody else. And so those type of things are really helping speed up the consumer identification process.
Fantastic. So I feel like, especially when I'm familiar with your digital first program with MasterCard, I think we all, from the pandemic, right, we tried to figure out how customers could do more. And there was an openness to do more things digitally, completely remotely, as you go through that. What I think what we're kind of highlighting here is that digital onboarding, delightful user experience, but it's also the introduction of this new risk component of more sophisticated fraud.
Right.
So the challenge that I think I've seen this earlier in Money 2020 is how do they do this, provide this user experience at scale, right? At acceptable levels of risk and being compliant. So specifically for that digital onboarding in your digital first, do you have any other comments? And I know you mentioned some of those, but how folks can go forward and what MasterCard's doing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So eCard is a great example where MasterCard's eCard identity solutions, they're actually using individual identity elements. And so they'll look at things like name and phone number and address and email address, and they'll specifically try to understand the history behind those. So when was this email address last used, or when was it first used? Is the address residential, or is it something else? And we take those individual elements of what was learned about them, and we also package them together and say, hey, how about are all these things used together somewhere? So is that unique profile used somewhere else? And again, what's the context behind that? How has that been used? And again, from all that, you can create a really unique profile to help our issuers. We've gone back and done a lot of research on what a great consumer experience looks like. And one of the things that we saw is that there's this thing called helper text on really good experiences. And helper text is just kind of listing out some process for consumers to help them figure out what they need to do when they're onboarding. And we're actually seeing companies now provide AI that will not only just provide the helper text, but they'll detect when you need it. So you're going through the process and they can see that you're stumbling, and then something will pop up and say, hey, I see that you're having a bit of an issue here. Maybe I can help out. And they'll say, I think you're having trouble with your trying to do your selfie video. So you say, try putting your phone in front of your face, about 12 inches, keep your eyes level, slowly move your hand left and right. And so it kind of walks you through the process. But again, it's detecting that. So it's using AI to figure out when you need help and when you don't. So it doesn't bother you, but when you do need help, it can actually help you.
That's very exciting. So if I try to kind of capture that, is the AI is helping with the user experience. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Because good user experience means more customers onboarded, happier customers to go through that, but also a layered capability as far as trying to prevent fraud, right? And being able to provide that user experience at scale. So feels like it's a mixture of excitement and anxiousness, right? I think you can feel that here at the show about how we move forward, but we're going to be watching it closely. I really appreciate you speaking with us. We're here at Money 2020, and I want to thank Pete for joining us here at the Entrust booth. Thank you very much, Pete. Appreciate it.